All right, welcome everyone to the Outdoors and Your Wellbeing. My name is Kim Guess. I'm the Wellness Program Dietitian with the Be Well at Work Wellness Program. And I wanted to do this presentation because I personally have been spending a lot of time outside during this pandemic, and it really helps me a lot. It helps me kind of keep a normal routine and helps me relax and socialize in a safe way. So I'm excited to share with you what I've learned and how the outdoors can benefit your well-being.
And hi everybody, I'm Nicole Castillo. I'm the Wellness Program Coordinator for Be Well at Work Wellness. I get to work with Kim on a daily basis, and I'm so excited to be doing this presentation with her. Let's see, so over the course of shelter in place in the pandemic, the outdoors have definitely been a place where I can recharge and refresh. Just a simple walk outside has been so refreshing and allows me to continue on through the workday, and it's just been really nice. All right, back to you, Kim.
Thanks, Nicole. So first of all, we want to acknowledge that the timing of this session is kind of interesting with the poor air quality and the wildfires. So we've had this planned for several months now, not knowing this was going to happen. But we will try to mention ways that you can also bring the outdoors in. You might notice I have some greenery around. These plants don't normally sit here, but I kind of wanted some greenery in the background, just to give an example of bringing some nature inside. So, back to the air quality, some of our suggestions maybe aren't the best idea right now, depending on where you live and what the air quality is like, although it does seem to be getting better today, some improvement. So just make sure for everything that we suggest that you're keeping in mind local guidance on air quality, on COVID, or any other concerns that arise. And, we're recording this session, I think today is September 15th, and all of this is subject to change, so just make sure that you're following the latest guidelines. So you can see our agenda here. This is what we hope to talk about today. Lots of different topics. So our first question to you, or you can answer in the chat, is what benefits have you experienced from spending time in nature? It can be specific to the situation right now with the pandemic, or just any benefits you've experienced. So you can see on our slide here, we have some potential physical and mental benefits to spending time outside, and maybe you've experienced some of these yourself. According to the Greater Good Science Center here at UC Berkeley, over 100 studies have shown that being in nature, living near nature, or even viewing nature in paintings and videos can have positive impacts on our brains, bodies, feelings, thought processes, and social interactions. I have a quick story myself. One time I went up to, I believe it was Cataract Falls, to go hiking with a friend, and we were meeting there. And there was a parade in downtown Fairfax, and a bunch of roads were blocked, and it was nearly impossible to get to the hiking trail. And I didn't have cell service. I was trying to find my way around the roadblock, and it got very stressful because I don't like being late and making people wait for me, and I didn't know how I'd get in touch with my friend. And somehow we ended up both getting there at the same time. We found our way around, and I was still kind of stressed out, but pretty much at the start of the hike, you get to the first waterfall, and it was such a huge difference. I noticed it right away. As soon as I was in nature, all that stress just disappeared and melted away. So for me, that was like a really clear example of some of the benefits. All right, again, so in the chat, you can feel free to share what benefits you've experienced from spending time in nature. All right, we have a few responses already. Just being active, hiking, or going to the beach and fresh air helps me sleep better. Oh, that's a really nice one. Thank you. So feel free to keep that conversation going. But we're going to move on, and I just wanted to talk about a few different other physical activities that you can do outside. So the first is walking, hiking, or jogging, anywhere where you can maintain that social distance, of course. Some ideas for sports that you can play that are fairly easy. Ideally, these would be with people from your household if you're sharing equipment, but you could maybe kick a soccer ball or throw a football, baseball, softball, any kind of ball. You can throw a frisbee, shoot hoops, and if you kick a soccer ball, that's something where you don't have to use your hands. So just make sure that you're following the local guidance related to COVID, and hopefully the air quality is good when you're doing that too. Biking, rollerblading, skating. You may have noticed that there's some places in the Bay Area that are slow streets where they've actually blocked off residential streets to make it safer for people to spend time outside and get outdoors for recreation and reduce the amount of cars so that there's no through traffic. So you can maybe see if there's some nice places to walk or bike outside in your neighborhood. And then something that maybe you've tried or maybe you haven't would be water sports. There's actually a lot of rental places that are currently open, and they rent equipment like kayaks, canoes, stand-up paddle boards. So just make sure that, per county and local guidelines that those places are allowed to operate, and look into the company to see what they're doing to make sure that it's safe for our customers. So the next few slides are about gardening. So in the chat, if you have local garden shops that you like, please tell us what they are and where they're located, because maybe somebody else who lives near you will be interested in visiting that shop. We encourage you to buy supplies local when possible. This pandemic obviously has had huge financial impact on a lot of small businesses, so it's great to support those local businesses when we can. So gardening is a fun, screen-free activity. It's educational, obviously, for children, but even for adults. And again, we have some ideas for supplies there. We have a handout that's available on our staff garden webpage. Again, we'll have the links to from these slides posted later, but we have some other ideas of local shops where you can buy equipment. And here's some ideas of what you can do with kids. So again, in the chat, if you have ideas of activities to do for gardening with children, let us know. But here's a few ideas from the Sierra Club that are broken down by age. And some of these can be done indoors, fortunately. So for preschool age kids, you can sprout potatoes and then eventually plant them and grow a potato plant. For elementary school age, you can start a worm bin, or which will make compost, or you could do a raised bed or a container garden. If you don't have a lot of space, but if you at least have a little bit of outdoor space like a patio, you could do a container garden. If you have no outdoor space, you can grow things like herbs in a sunny windowsill. Vegetables probably won't grow indoors because they need a lot of sunlight, but a lot of herbs will grow. If you have tweens or teens, that's a good age to do some volunteer work. It can be as simple as just starting seeds, planting seeds in little pots and starting them growing, germinate them and giving them away. Or maybe you have elderly neighbors who might need a little help cleaning up their yard, or just planting seeds. So, assuming the air quality is good, that's something that can be done safely without getting too close to others. So we're getting some recommendations for local shops. Thank you all for participating. We have the Dry Garden Nursery for cactus and succulents. I believe that's in Berkeley, correct? On Shattuck, I've seen that place. Annie's Annuals in Richmond for garden supplies and plants. In Southern California, Armstrong Garden Centers in Pasadena. So thank you all for your recommendations and keep them coming. So if you want more information on activities that you can do with kids, then you can check out our handout later. Oh, yes, and Dry Garden Nursery is on Shattuck. Oh, kind of on the border of Berkeley and Oakland. So we also have some information about ergonomics on our staff garden webpage and on this handout. I'm not going to go into too much detail because we do have campus ergonomists who know a lot more than I do. But basically, to help you enjoy the process of gardening while staying healthy, it's important to warm up before you start, use safe body mechanics to complete the task, protect your knees, wear good gloves, and use well-maintained tools and take frequent rest breaks. So, you know, it is considered physical activity, so things that you would do before, during, and after a workout are still important when it comes to gardening. So if you want more information on that, we have some on our handout that includes things like stretches that you can do. So if you're wondering, what can you plant? Now it's kind of the end of summer right now, we're moving into fall. We have some ideas for you, but our next question for the chat is, what vegetables have you grown in the fall? You know, there's certain vegetables that are known as being seasonal in the fall and winter, and it can really vary depending on your region or even location in the Bay Area. So if you have insight to what grows well near you, please let us know. So some fall vegetables, I picked out a few that grow quickly, so it's more rewarding, and are ready to harvest in a little over a month. So those would be arugula, radishes, turnips, and spinach. So if you want more information on growing food, there's a lot of great resources. The first one on our list is the Master Gardeners through UC Agriculture and Natural Resources, A&R. They actually have different master gardeners in each county, so you can find really specific local information to where you live. The Ecology Center in Berkeley has also a lot of amazing resources. They have all kinds of stuff, workshops, they have a store, online resources, webinars, a lot of really amazing resources for everything related to ecology, but they have a handout on East Bay planting times if you're here in the East Bay. And then the Edible Schoolyard Project has a lot of really great information for kids as well. It can be used for adults too. They have information about regrowing food scraps. And one of the easiest to do is green onions. So that's something you can do indoors. This is something that I do pretty much constantly. If you've come to any of my cooking classes, you probably heard me talk about it. So if you cut off the top green part of the green onion to use, you save the white part and just stick in a little glass of water in a sunny windowsill, and it'll just start growing. And eventually it'll grow roots. And lately I've been taking those and just planting them in a little pot outside, and then they grow like crazy. So that's a fun way to do a little bit of gardening. All right, so now we're going to talk about camping. So in the chat, our next question is, where do you like to camp? And you know, some of these places may not be open right now. So if you do have recommendations on campgrounds that are currently open, maybe this weekend is not the best time to go depending on the air quality, but just for future reference, we'll take some recommendations for local campgrounds. So we kind of have our spectrum here of options of camping, starting with kind of beginner, easiest, going to a little bit more advanced, more commitment and more cost probably. So here's one you can do inside, just camping in your living room. So this is a great idea for little kids. Maybe you're not sure how they'll do. Maybe you're not sure how you would do camping and you just want to give it a try. Or just feel like you're escaping without having to leave your home. Just sleeping in a different room maybe will make a difference. So it might sound kind of silly, but this would be no cost, no equipment necessary. You could just set up some chairs and blankets and kind of create a little fort. So So you could do some camping type activities like singing, reading by the flashlight, doing crafts, maybe cooking some recipes that you might cook while camping, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. So just kind of a nice intro to camping and something that you can do if you're feeling kind of stuck inside and want to go somewhere different. The next would be your backyard if you have one. If you can camp out there safely, you would need the basics, but again, it's a good introduction where you still have your bathroom and your kitchen that you can access, and you can go inside and get on the internet if necessary. But you would basically just need a tent and something to sleep on. But other than that, no additional costs, no need to travel, not as many concerns about COVID. So again, kind of a nice introduction. And if you are open to camping or have tried it before and looking for some new ideas, you might be able to visit some local campgrounds. But just remember, it's up to you what you feel safe doing and also what's currently allowed. We have some recommendations here. Camp Lotus, a big hit with the family along the American River. That sounds nice. Fallen Leaf in Tahoe. What's this one called? intowncampground.com. So check out some of the ideas in the chat. So state parks are in California, the majority remain closed right now. I just looked for the latest update a couple days ago. The latest update was back in June, and it says 29 state parks are open, but the majority remain closed. For national parks, we'll talk a little bit more about these on the next slide, but basically you'll want to just check with each individual park to see what they're open and how much is open. You may have heard of KOA. It's a privately owned chain of campgrounds or franchise. Not sure exactly how they do it, but that's another option. And a newer option is called Hip Camp, which is sort of like Airbnb for camping. I know I've personally used this several times. Basically, if somebody has land and they want to rent part of it out for camping, they might have just a space for a tent. Some of them even have yurts, cabins, RVs, tree houses, so all kinds of different places you could camp. Some of them are animal sanctuaries, some of them are on farms, so all kinds of cool options that are opened up by that. But again, just, you know, these are individual hosts, so you want to check in and see what they're doing to make sure that it's safe. And finally, where do you get equipment? If you are new to camping and don't want to commit to buying everything you need, there are a few stores that will rent out equipment. And if you have ideas of other stores that rent equipment, then again, you can put this in the chat box. But a couple of stores that we've heard of that rent equipment that are have several locations here in the Bay Area are Sports Basement and REI. So let us know if you have any other recommendations on where to rent or buy equipment. These are some tips, and this infographic is from the National Park Service. So again, you know, we're recording this in September 2020, but this is subject to change. But their recommendations are here, and you can find more information on their website. The first one is know before you go. So like I mentioned, you'll want to check with each individual park to see what the conditions are, availability of restrooms and other facilities. And just to make a plan, and if you're sick, obviously stay home and follow the 10 essentials, which they have on their website. Basically, this is a collection of first aid and emergency items that can help you in the event of minor injuries, sudden weather changes, or unexpected delays. So you may need additional items depending on what activities you're doing, like a life jacket or bug spray. And it's actually, it should be the 12 essentials now, because you'll want to add on a face covering and hand sanitizer. The next one is keep it close. So follow state and county orders governing the open status of the area you're considering visiting. And the National Park Service is working closely with governors and state and local health departments to increase access and services across the system. The next one is keep your distance. So ideally you would be going out with people in your household. Give others plenty of room, whether you're on a trail, on a boat launch, or just in the parking lot. So follow CDC guidelines for social distancing and be prepared to cover your nose and mouth when you're near others. The next one is know your limits. So maybe you want to try something new and challenging, but this may not be the best time. You may consider postponing something that is new to you and very challenging to allow first responders to concentrate on responding to the pandemic. So, we don't want you getting stranded in the woods or having to be rescued or anything like that. Keep it with you refers to anything you bring. So keep in mind that the trash may not be emptied as regularly. So try to pack out whatever you bring with you. Keep in mind also that some restroom facilities may not be open, so you'll want to plan accordingly. And finally, keep it inclusive and play an active part in making the nation's parks and public lands safe and welcoming for all identities and abilities. And here at the bottom, you can see there's a link for virtual parks. There's some national parks that have like a 360 tour that you can do and have some fun kind of park related activities. So again, more things that you can do inside available on that website. So now we'll talk about cooking outside. So the question for the chat is, what do you like to cook outdoors or while camping, or just foods that remind you of being outdoors that you can also cook inside? So this can be as simple as using a public grill if they're open. Some of them are closed off, but it doesn't have to be expensive. All you really need is some charcoal, foil to put down on the grill so that you don't have to worry about cleaning it off, tongs to move the food around with, and then just something to cook. So I want to talk a little bit about food safety when it comes to grilling. Whether you're going out to a picnic or to a park and grilling, or just at home, all these will apply. So first of all, just be careful with cross-contamination. Be careful with anything that touched raw meat, and don't use the same container that the raw meat was in. If you're going out camping or basically anywhere where you're leaving the house, put the raw meat in the bottom of the cooler and make sure you seal it so that the juices don't spill and contaminate the other food. Bring hand sanitizer, moist towelettes, or even biodegradable soap and water. Temperature control. So cold food should be kept at 40 degrees or lower. You can even put an appliance thermometer in your cooler to make sure. Make sure you cook meat properly. I have the temperatures here on the slide. And the thing is that grilled meats often look cooked on the outside, but they may be raw on the inside still. So it's important to check the temperatures and make sure you're not just charring the outside. If you're using ground meat for things such as burgers, just keep in mind that those have a greater risk for contamination because the meat is ground up, whereas things like steaks, the bacteria can only really be on the outside. Avoid open coolers more than necessary. So if you are having a picnic and let's say you're bringing something raw to cook and you're also bringing some beverages, it might be a good idea to keep those in separate coolers so you can open the beverage cooler as much as you want, and then you can keep the other food cold. And then keep in mind that food should stay up for no longer than 2 hours, whether you're outside or at home. And the limit is 1 hour if the temperature is 90 degrees or above. Now, when it comes to grilling or cooking meat really over any kind of high heat, but more often it's grilling, this causes the fat to drip, which can form potentially cancer-causing chemicals called heterocyclic amines, or HCAs, that end up on the meat coming from the rising smoke. So this can occur to a lesser extent if you're say, pan frying or broiling, especially when the meat is well done. So a few tips to reduce this. The first one is to marinate meat. This may reduce HCAs by 60 to 90% actually. So the marinade can have citrus juice, vegetable oil, vinegar, mustard, herbs and spices, or even beer and wine. Excuse me. But in your marinade, avoid excess sugar because that can increase HCA formation. And of course, don't eat the leftover marinade unless you boil it for at least 1 minute to kill any bacteria. If you're at home, you can pre-cook meat in the microwave or oven, then finish it on the grill. So that way you're not going to be charring it quite as much. You can also trim the visible fat and choose leaner cuts so there's less fat that will drip down and cause the smoke to rise. You can also wrap meat in foil to protect it from the smoke, or just place the meat on foil to protect it from, or to catch the dripping fat. And I know this is a popular way to grill because it can be tasty, but try not to char what you're cooking or scrape off those charred bits because they're not so good when it comes to potentially cancer-causing compounds. And another tip is actually plant-based foods form very little HCAs. Things like veggie burgers, tofu, and vegetables, when they're grilled, there's little to no formation of HCA. So even if you are having burgers, maybe you just grill some veggies on the side or do some sort of a mix so that it's a little bit less meat. So again, in the chat, if you want to share any of your favorite things to cook outside or that remind you of being outdoors, like picnics or camping, then let us know. But here's a few recipes, and you can find these recipes when we share the slides later. But we have several that are good for grilling or campfires, but all these recipes can be made indoors at home as well. So we have carrot dogs, which is the first picture, might sound kind of funny, but you actually marinate lightly cooked carrots and they take on the flavor of a hot dog, and then you can grill them or cook them on the stovetop or whatever you want. Foil packet meals, something that I make pretty much every time I go camping. You take kind of whatever vegetables you like. You can throw in meat or another protein if you want to, some sort of seasoning. Just wrap it up in a foil packet and either throw it in the embers and or cook it over the grate. So there's a question about foil. Some people are saying to avoid it. I think at this time there's not enough evidence to say that we should be avoiding aluminum foil. The concern is about the aluminum. But if you want to play it safe, there are ways that you can do that. You know, if you're going to wrap something in foil, you could put parchment paper in between if you want to be careful. I know when I've made foil packets in the past, I've actually lined them with lettuce. And you don't eat the lettuce. You can if you want, but it just kind of helps keep everything moist. So I think if you want to be cautious, there are ways around it. The next one is stuffed bananas. It's sort of like an alternative to s'mores where you can open up the banana, cut a slit into it and stuff it with things like marshmallows or chocolate and peanut butter and wrap it up and put it in the fire, or you can just roast that in your oven. Simple chili, 5-ingredient chili is easy to make for camping, and portobello steak. So if you're looking for a fun vegetable to grill that's really flavorful, we have a recipe for that on our website. We also have some recipes for picnics, like a potato salad, a vinegar-based potato salad. It's really refreshing. Guacamole deviled eggs, kind of a twist on deviled eggs. Curried chickpea salad, and a really simple cucumber watermelon salad. All right, so Nicole's gonna talk to you about arts and crafts.
All right, thanks, Kim. Hi, everybody. I'm gonna pop in for a little arts and crafts segment. I don't know if we have any fellow crafters out in the audience, but I love arts and crafts as a hobby, and with all the shelter in place, I've gotten into a lot of new arts and crafts, and it's been very relaxing and stress relieving for me. The next couple crafts I'm going to talk about were inspired by the outdoors. I was telling Kim I thought about these while I was outside watering my new plants. So the first craft is DIY biodegradable sidewalk paint. This is great for the whole family if you have kids, but also a lot of fun for adults too. So you basically mix together a quarter cup of cornstarch, a quarter cup of cold water, and 6 to 8 drops of whatever food coloring you'd like. And then you stir that till it's well blended. And then you just take a paintbrush and then you can paint this just as you would chalk outside on the sidewalk. And it washes away super easily with a hose. If you want to try your hand at DIY food coloring, you could also use things like beets, turmeric, blueberries, or spinach, and mix it with the same measurements. And when we send this presentation out, it'll have the exact recipe for the sidewalk paint as well. Let's see. And the next craft is the Kindness Rocks project. So I don't know if anyone has heard of this before, but in 2015, Megan Murphy created it as a way to encourage people to share inspiring messages with others. The quote, if you can't read it on the slide or in the photo, says, "Take one when you need one, share one with a friend who needs inspiration, or leave one for another." And the right message at just the right moment can change your whole day. So it's a super simple project. I've done this a lot of times before. You basically find a rock or a stone that has kind of like a bigger size and a flatter surface, and you paint over it, and then you could use paint markers to write an inspiring quote or something uplifting. And then the idea behind it is you leave it outside, whether it's out in your front yard or as you take a walk through the neighborhood, leave it in someone else's yard or at a park, and someone will come along and see your quote, and it might be just the right thing they needed to hear that day. Let's see, has anyone tried either of these crafts or any other outdoor crafts? Feel free to write it in the chat and share it with everybody. Let's see. Also, on the topic of non-toxic paints, there are multi-surface acrylic, non-toxic acrylic paints that you can use. For example, Apple Barrel brand, sorry, is one of them. And an optional thing is you could use Mod Podge to seal over the top. I know right now is not exactly the ideal time to be walking outside, but both of these crafts can definitely be done inside with the whole family, just on a table, and it'd be a fun arts and crafts project.
Thanks, Nicole. Love those ideas. Oh, we have a comment. I like leaving hopscotch in front of my house and watch walkers do it as they pass by.
Oh,
nice.
That's a great idea. I saw a video when someone did something similar. They did hopscotch and then they extended it. It was like, follow the line, do a spin, strike a pose, and it's just the simple things in it. And then you see adults doing it too. So it sounds like a lot of fun.
We have somebody comment, I'm the neighbor that hopscotches, LOL. I have too. I've been out there walking and I thought, oh, why not? Those people are probably watching me, but it's okay. You know, gotta have a little fun and not be so serious all the time. Very cute. So we're gonna kind of wrap up talking a little bit about safety. So first we're gonna talk about sun safety. And this is important especially for kids, even more so for those under 6 months. So when it comes to sunscreen, you'll want to make sure to follow product warnings for sunscreen on infants younger than 6 months old. Most manufacturers recommend or advise against using sunscreens on infants, or advise parents and adults and caregivers to consult a doctor first. The American Academy of Pediatrics says that small amounts of sunscreen can be used on infants as a last resort when caretakers can't find shade. So we'll talk about some other options here. For toddlers and children, test sunscreen by applying a small amount on the inside of your child's wrist the day before you plan to use it. Okay, so here's some top sun safety tips from the Environmental Working Group. And honestly, when I read this, it kind of made me think differently about sunscreen. So what they're saying is to first do these things and then consider sunscreen. So do what you can out of these options first. The first one is covering up. Could be shirt, hat, shorts, and pants that provide protection from UV rays. If you just cover up with clothing, then you don't have to really worry so much about reapplying sunscreen and dealing with that sticky feeling all the time. And you can consider buying something like a sun shirt. There's actually clothing that's specifically meant for reducing your exposure to the sun's rays. It doesn't have to be special sun clothing. It can just be anything that's woven tightly. But basically, some clothing can have a UV protection factor, UPF, of 30 or even 50, or the factor is 30 or 50 or even higher. And a lot of times the sun clothing is kind of meant to be breathable and cool, so you can be wearing it out in the hot sun, whereas if you're wearing, you know, a tightly woven regular sweater in the summertime, it might protect you from the sun, but won't be very comfortable. So something to consider. The next tip is to find shade or make shade. So doing things like picnicking under a tree, reading under an umbrella, or take a canopy with you outside or to the beach. And again, keep infants in the shade as much as possible because their skin is thin, it's not fully developed yet, which makes it vulnerable to sun damage as well as the chemicals in sunscreen. So better to just keep them in the shade as much as possible. The next tip is to plan around the sun. Go outdoors in the early morning or late afternoon when the sun is lower and the UV radiation is less because it peaks at midday. And finally, wear sunglasses. Protect your eyes from UV radiation because that can cause cataracts. So again, try to do all those things first, and then if you still need sunscreen, then of course use sunscreen. So the EWG recommends SPF of 15 to 50, and they say not to fall for those high SPF ratings because anything higher than 50 can tempt you to stay in the sun too long. It kind of gives you that false sense of security. And even if you don't burn, your skin may be getting damaged. So try to choose a product based on your own skin coloration, anticipated time outside, shade, and cloud cover, and reapply often. Their next tip is to avoid sunscreens with vitamin A. Eating vitamin A in the form of vegetables and fruits is good for you, but spreading it on your skin may not be such a good idea. Government data shows that tumors and lesions develop sooner on skin coated with creams laced with vitamin A, also called retinol palmitate or retinol. Avoid any skin or lip product whose label includes any of those ingredients: retinol, palmitate, retinol, or vitamin A. Next, don't combine sunscreen with repellent because usually they need to be reapplied in different intervals. So you might be doing too much of the repellent if you're reapplying it as often as you would sunscreen. So buy repellent separately if necessary and apply it first. They also recommend avoiding sprays. Sprays cloud the air with tiny particles that may not be safe to breathe. So you especially don't want to use them inside, like in your bathroom, where there's less ventilation. And the ingredient that they recommend avoiding that's very common in sunscreen is called oxybenzone. This is a synthetic estrogen that penetrates the skin and may disrupt the hormone system. Two other ingredients that aren't necessarily safe, but also aren't really used anymore, are PABA and trolamine salicylate. So avoid those if you have, some really old sunscreen laying around. So the question is, what do you look for? Look for products with zinc oxide, which protects your skin from harmful UVA radiation. This is considered GRASE, generally recognized as safe and effective. You may have heard of GRAS before, GRAS. That usually applies to food ingredients that are recognized as safe, but in this case, this ingredient is also known to be effective. Zinc oxide as well as titanium dioxide. So I actually emailed Dr. Kim Harley, who works here at UC Berkeley, who has done some research on this topic. And basically she said overall, she does want to stress that it is important to wear sunscreen and protect yourself from the sun, because sun exposure is a known cause of cancer. But we also want to be careful in how we protect ourselves, including covering up and using products with zinc or titanium dioxide to protect the spread of chemical exposures to ourselves, but also to the environment. That's the other thing. Some of these sunscreens aren't really safe for the environment if you're going in a lake or in the ocean. So she had studied this, and basically the reason to be careful is that sometimes the products that you put on your skin, those chemicals can end up in your body. So this slide demonstrates that, where they showed levels of oxybenzone in urine samples from teenage girls, and those who reported using sunscreen in the last 24 hours had much higher levels of oxybenzone in their bodies than those who had not worn sunscreen in that time period. And when they asked the girls to stop using the regular products for 3 days, they saw a 36% drop in oxybenzone levels. So again, bottom line, protect yourself from the sun however possible. Try to do other things that don't involve sunscreen first, but then if necessary, do use sunscreen. I know I personally was trying to buy these better quality sunscreens and found that they're a little pricey. So when I thought about it, I thought, oh, it makes financial sense to maybe invest in a long sleeve sun shirt that I can wear over and over again, use less sunscreen, save money, and then I don't have to worry so much about reapplying it regularly and having that sticky feeling on my hands. So just all these different options for you to consider, whatever works for you. And finally, we're going to talk about insect safety. Basically, we have some information here from the CDC, and overall, it looks like tick and insect transmitted diseases are on the rise, which can have serious health impacts and even lead to death. And this is a large and growing public health problem in the United States. And experts believe that this is related to a warming climate that expands the habitat of some insects. So a few tips are to cover up your skin with clothing and tuck your pants into your socks so that you're not leaving these areas open where insects can get in. Check for ticks, especially if you're in areas that are known to have more ticks. And then we have some recommended ingredients again from the Environmental Working Group. You might be surprised to see DEET on this list, under 30%. Many people are concerned about possible drawbacks of DEET, but the EWG researchers have analyzed the science in depth and found that with proper application precaution, they do recommend DEET as well as ingredients called picaridin and IR3535, which effectively reduce risk from life-altering disease and have very low toxicity concerns. So if you want more information on ticks and insects protection, then the EWG has more information on that. Other options that seem to be effective are oil of lemon eucalyptus, PMD, and 2-undecanone. And if you're interested in learning more, the CDC has this ArboNet. It's an interactive map where you can see the rate of mosquito-borne illnesses by state, county, and year. So just if you're interested in learning more. So we just have a few minutes left. We wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions and let you know that we have an evaluation. If you have a chance to fill it out, we really appreciate your feedback. This is one of the first online virtual webinars that we're doing this fall. So we'd love to hear your feedback so we can always be improving. And just wanted to post some of our upcoming workshops.
Kim, there was a question back during the gardening section that I took note of about if you have any recommendations for indoor herb gardens or other crops that can be grown indoors.
Yeah, I would love to hear if anybody else has any recommendations. Personally, I live in a pretty dark apartment, so I haven't had a lot of luck. I kind of have buildings on both sides, so I don't get a lot of sunlight, but I have managed to regrow green onions. So I think if I can do it, anybody can do it. Other than that, I think some of the herbs that I've grown fairly easily, mostly outside though, because I have to, is parsley and mint. Mint's a pretty easy one. Last summer we had what was it called? Our staff garden event during Staff Appreciation Week, and we had people plant their own herbs. And so we have a lot of information on growing herbs on our staff garden website. And we have a chart with some easy to grow herbs. And I think it actually says what kind of sunlight each different herb needs. So you can kind of see what works for you and maybe pick something off that list. Are there any other questions? See some other comments throughout. We had a comment that says, I believe you can also use your FSA to purchase sunscreen. Oh, that would be nice. So again, we'll send out the evaluation after this, and we can also include the slides and the recording. I think the recording takes a little bit of time to process, but we can get this posted on our website afterwards, and the presentation with all the links. But we hope that you're able to spend some time outside when the air quality improves. That might be coming soon, hopefully starting to look better. And if not, hopefully this just gave you a few ideas to feel a little bit like you're outside or in your home, and ideas for when the air quality does improve.
Yeah,
thank you all so much for joining. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming, and thank you to those that left some suggestions in the chat box. I learned from you guys as well.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.